Well, this country was built by independent contractors, contrary to what Joe Biden said. Joe Biden says all the time that the unions built this country. That is just simply not true. We didn't have major unions in this country until the 1930s, when the union movement really moved. But we had independent contractors up until that time in many, many cases. And right now, 80% of the independent contractors in our country love what they do. They love their operations. They don't want to work for somebody else. So it's very, very important that we protect that. Freedom is what this country was based on. Being forced to join a union is not what this country is about. We're about independent contractors. My father was an independent contractor most of his life.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of American Potential. Got a great member of Congress as our guest today, and I'm excited to have her join us to talk about education. Before finishing high school, students think about what they want to do after graduating. Do they want to go into a trade, or do they want to attend a college or a university? And for students that plan to attend college, how many will drop out or take on student loan debt that is more than what they will make in a year, or earn a degree that simply isn't in demand? Well, one Congresswoman has introduced the College Cost Reduction Act to allow for more transparency when it comes to the cost of getting a degree, while also holding colleges and universities responsible to make sure students have a good return on their investment. So, who is this Congresswoman who has decided to take that issue on? Well, she was born in Manhattan, but moved to the mountains of North Carolina when she was 6 years old, where her family didn't have power or running water in the house until she was 14 years old. Now, during her senior year of high school, she was hired to help clean the school for $10 a month. And she went on to attend college and graduated with a degree in English and sociology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Later, she earned her Doctor of Education in Curriculum and Teaching, Higher Education, from UNC Greensboro. She's held different positions in higher ed, from being an instructor, an assistant dean, and president of a community college. Now, before heading to Congress, she served as a state senator, as well as serving on many state and national committees. She's the chairwoman of the House Education and Workforce Committee, and she is a champion for educational freedom in America. I want to welcome the Congresswoman for North Carolina's 5th District, Dr. Virginia Foxx. All right, Madam Chairwoman, thanks for being with us. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Okay, now, first of all, I understand you are a former Christmas tree farmer. So now you have to tell me that story.
Well, my husband and I have both been poor all of our lives. We grew up extremely poor. After college, we moved back to the mountains. My husband then had to work away from home because he was a community planner and there were no jobs for him here. And so he worked away from home, being gone during the week, home on weekends. And we were looking for a way that he could be at home. And we went into the nursery and landscaping business. We'd also been in the construction business for a little while, but then a big recession hit and we got out of that. But we decided we'd go into the nursery and landscaping business because you don't need a lot of capital to do that. Tom always said you just need a pickup and a shovel. But we started always the hard way. We never had any money. So we grew our trees, we were Fraser firs and white pines, but mostly Fraser firs from seed. And we had a little bit of land. We kept buying a little piece of property every chance we could. We'd save our money for that. And so we got in the Christmas tree business. Takes a long time to do that when you're starting out from scratch. A 7-foot tree is about 15 to 16 years old. So we started back in 1974. We got to the point where we were selling between 1,000 and 2,000 trees a year. And that's not a lot in the Christmas tree business. Most people around here were selling a lot more. So we did it for many, many years. Finally, our daughter took over our business, but she couldn't quite handle the nursery and landscaping and retail business and do trees too, because they're a pretty specific kind of work to do. But I loved growing Christmas trees.
Yeah. Well, and you and I talked about it just a minute ago before we started the interview. We talked about the name of this podcast being American Potential. And, just kind of looking through, and I gave a little bit of your story growing up in the mountains of North Carolina in the intro. But, you are really a great example of the American story. Do you care, though, to share a little bit more about that with our listeners, your upbringing and your growing up?
Sure. I grew up in Avery County in the mountains of North Carolina. And as I said, very poor, lived in houses with no electricity, no running water, only rental houses till I was 14. And then we saved up enough money to buy a house. I'll never forget it as long as I live, $1,100 for the house. We paid $100 down and $100 a year plus interest for the next 10 years. And I always wondered, how would we ever get another $100 together for that? But my parents had a 6th and 9th grade education, but they always wanted me and my brother, I had 2 brothers and a sister, to do well in school. And I've always had poor eyesight, not good in sports. So I did well in school. And I see my life as an example of what every American can do in this country. You can get a good education, you can work hard, and you can succeed. So that's what I did. I worked my way through college. Took me 7 years to get my undergraduate degree because I went full-time, went to school part-time, got married, had a child, but eventually got my English degree, then went back and got a master's degree, and then took me 7 years to get my doctorate again, working full-time, going to school part-time. Thought I'd be in education all my life because that's what made a difference to me. I've always said, again, good education, hard work, you can succeed at whatever talent the Lord gave you, you can use that talent and succeed. It doesn't mean you have to have a college degree. You certainly don't have to have a doctorate in this country to succeed. If God had given me the talent of being a plumber, which in many ways I wish he had, I would have done well at that, I think. You just have to learn a skill. Typing was my best skill. And so typing's always been great for me. And a little bit of speaking, I guess that's been helpful to me too. But that's what happened with me. I have a younger brother who got a master's degree. Then my other brother didn't want to go to college. He told me that as senior year in high school. But he said, I don't want you and Mom and Dad to be ashamed of me. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to be a carpenter. And I said, well, that's a very good profession to go into. Some famous people were carpenters. And I said, right. So I helped get a carpentry apprenticeship program going for him that we really needed in our area. And he got through that, going to school at night, 4 nights a week. And 3.5 years later, he got his carpentry apprenticeship license and journeyman license, excuse me. And he is the smartest man in our family, though, because he can do anything. Taught me how to buy my first computer. My younger sister didn't go to college, but she's extraordinarily bright, worked in a factory for 30 years, but she is very bright, very self-sufficient. So my family's all taken the talents that they have and used them to their highest and best use.
Yeah. And it's funny, as you were telling that, I just thought of this question. I always have told my kids, if you end up doing as a career what you enjoy, that you have a passion for it, that you will be successful at it.
Absolutely.
Is that good advice you think I'm giving my kids?
Absolutely. I used to be an advisor at Appalachian State University, and students would come in and say, my parents want me to major in business. What should I major in to get a good job? And I'd say, what do you love? What do you want to do? You'll be successful at what you're good at and what you love. I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah. Well, so what led you to sort of prioritize education in your career?
Well, my senior year in high school, I was the high school janitor, and I was sweeping out the school at afternoon, and I had a student teacher who was in our English class, and he said, you're smart, you need to go to college. And I did, but he was my role model. And I thought, I'll go be an English teacher and have an impact on other people like he had on me.
Yeah. Now, you're the chairwoman of the House Committee on Education and Workforce. Talk about how you believe education and workforce development policies can kind of intersect and create more opportunities for American workers, particularly in what's become kind of an evolving job market.
Well, my understanding is that the Committee on Education, the Committee on Labor merged. There were separate committees up until 1947. And that was a smart move on the part of the Congress to merge those two committees because they do intersect very strongly. Again, if you want to have a successful work life, then you need a good education. And as I said earlier, you don't need a baccalaureate degree. That's a myth in our country that you have to have a college degree to be successful. But you do need skill development, and we call it workforce development most of the time. So it's important that those two pieces come together, and we work together very much in the public policy arena. But it's obvious that that is also true out beyond the government, where business and industry needs people who have the best kind of skills background that they can possibly find. And so they look to us in the public policy area and in the committee to bring those two issues together.
Now, when you refer to workforce development, you don't like to use the word training. Why is that?
Well, the only thing I remember from my doctoral program at UNC Greensboro was a professor said one night, don't use the T word, and he wouldn't even say the word. Don't use the T word when you deal with people. You train dogs, you educate people. And so I've tried to get people away from using the T word. I was the president of community college, and I'm very sensitive to that. That has been the word used so much in community colleges and in programs that don't necessarily lead to a baccalaureate degree. But everything in a baccalaureate degree, you talk about education. Well, they're both education. And so we're educating people. We're not training robots. We're educating people. We want people who will think, who will learn continually how to improve their skills. And so I correct people when they use the T word, when they're talking about human beings. And, it sticks. I only have to say it once to people. And I have people sometimes come back and see me and they say, oh, no, I'm not supposed to say the T word. And we've gotten away from it. I will pick up literature from colleges and particularly community colleges and programs where they are educating people and they've used the T word. And I tell them, get rid of it because you're creating two tracks in many ways. We don't do that in our country. In Europe, they separate students usually at about the age of 15 and send them into non-baccalaureate programs and other people into baccalaureate programs. We don't do that in our country, and I would never advocate for that. But I think we need to continue to emphasize education. And again, we want people who can think, who can solve problems. And when all you're doing is something by rote, that's not what you're teaching.
Yeah. I just a couple of weeks ago interviewed Mike Rowe and talked with him about some of the great things his Micro Works Foundation is doing. And he's really shining a light on this for a lot of people in the United States. Of course, it shot out of his show, Dirty Jobs, to show that those are jobs that are, first of all, worthwhile, but also that you can be highly successful at them. Your thoughts on maybe some of the ways America's views on those issues are changing?
Well, they are changing, and I think it's the result of a lot of things. And by the way, Mike Rowe needs to be broken from using the T word, too. I think Mike does a great job. I've admired his work from afar, and we've had him as a witness at a hearing. But all of us need to stop using that word. But what has happened, I think, in the last few years has been a great confluence of issues. Number one, even before COVID, there was a lot written about the fact that we were having a low graduation rate from colleges and universities, that the debt was soaring for college and university students, and that there were, at the time when we began talking about it, when I was talking about this 6 or 8 years ago, 7 million jobs unfilled. Now we have 9 million jobs unfilled that require skilled workers. And so the messages have been coming from several different directions that we need to change our approach. Again, we need to be focused on skill development, upskilling too. There are many jobs that are going away because of the technology change and because the rapid growth that was occurring in our economy for several years. People needed to upskill. They were in good paying jobs, but the jobs were changing. So we need to talk about both skill preparation and upskilling, where people improve their skills or change jobs. 30 years ago, they were saying that we changed jobs 7 times in our career. I think that's changing a lot more now.
Yeah. Let's talk about the College Cost Reduction Act. How do you see that benefiting American students and families, and what parts of the act are you most excited about?
Oh, I'm excited about all of it, but the College Cost Reduction Act does several things that I think are really needed in our country. Number one, it brings about transparency and it brings about accountability for colleges and universities. Students choose their colleges a lot of times without much information. They need to know how much it's going to cost them, how long it's going to take, what are the chances of their getting jobs with their majors, and those basic kinds of things. Many students go in having no idea how much it's really going to cost and what are the, again, chances of getting a job with that major. We want that there's billions of dollars going into higher education every year without this accountability. So that's something that is very, very important that we bring. We want the colleges and universities to have responsibility for the money that they're encouraging students to borrow to get these degrees that they're getting. And in some cases, they're being saddled with huge debt. And we want the colleges and universities to co-sign for that debt for the students, because many of them take out loans that they're not able to pay back. For part of the problem is they drop out of school. They don't get the right counseling. They're not helped to get their degrees. And in many cases, it shouldn't be there to begin with. We will also want to simplify the loan processes for the students. We have a tremendously complicated situation now with students. There are like 45 ways to pay back a loan because there are so many programs in the federal government. And so we want to simplify that process. We want students to know exactly how much money they're borrowing and what are the terms and conditions for paying it back. And we have had many students in the past who have paid a lot on their loans, but never pay anything on the principal. And so they have overpaid on the loans in many cases. So we have only a couple of ways for students to pay back so they know exactly what they're doing. We're working on a better accreditation system. We want to open up the system for accreditation. There's just many things that we're doing in the act that will make college education and so much better for our students. It'll hold down the cost. The schools have to tell the students what the costs are going to be, and we hope guarantee that for the whole time that they're there, up to 8 years, that they won't raise the cost of the education. Transparency and accountability, though, are the two main things that are going to come out of this bill. Yeah.
Those are things. It's hard to believe we've gone as long as we have with the system that we have and all of the student loan debt that's been taken on by Americans, and we haven't had this kind of transparency in the system before, and the accountability as well. So, good on you. And where is that bill now?
We are working on it, and we're hoping that we passed it out of the committee, and we're hoping very much that we will get it on the floor of the House sometime soon. We're working on getting additional co-sponsors for it. So we passed it late last year, and we're looking forward to getting it passed out of the House and then get it into the hands of the Senate. Great.
Now, the Biden administration, and this has been in the news, most Americans at least know about this, they transferred nearly $138 billion in student loan debt to American families who are already struggling. What's Congress done to try and stop this unconstitutional overreach of the executive branch?
Well, thank you for saying that. It is unconstitutional. It's illegal. And I repeat that over and over and over again. The Supreme Court told the Biden administration it could not forgive the student loans in the way that it was going to do it. It told them that last June. But they found other mechanisms. They're finding loopholes in laws that they are using to transfer the debt from the students that owe it to taxpayers who never took out the debt, never went to college, most of them. Only 13% of the people in this country right now have this debt, and they're transferring the debt onto the backs of the 87% of us who did not take out those loans. So we've done our best. We've passed what's known as a Congressional Review Act to try to stop what they're doing. But we've done that in the House. That's the way we do that when they pass rules that they say are backed up by laws, but we haven't had the Senate take that up. And it has to be passed in the House, in the Senate, and then signed by the president.
Now, in your view, what role should private companies, private industries, and market competition play in kind of improving the quality and the relevance of education, especially when you talk about workforce preparation?
Well, our colleges and universities have been set up to prepare people for work. Harvard University was the first university in this country, and it was set up to educate preachers. We had preachers come to this country from England in the early days of the country. They were dying out, and we didn't have a mechanism in this country for educating new preachers. And so I say the word preacher, I think that's a word everybody understands, ministers, but basically they wanted them to understand how to teach people the Bible. So Harvard started that way. That's the way most colleges and universities were established. It's certainly true for the community college system, and it's true for many proprietary schools. So there should be a very close working relationship between private industry and the colleges and universities. So there are fairs all the time where business and industry goes and recruits people graduating from the universities, interviewing graduates. They should be talking to their departments there and saying, this is what we need in a graduate from your institution. At the community college level, in most cases, the programs that are set up there are set up in conjunction with a local business or industry, helping to prepare people to go to work there. The schools have advisory boards where people come to them and say, okay, this is the latest technology. This is what you need to do. This is how you need to change the curriculum. So there should be a hand in glove relationship between business and industry and the education establishments in our country. I think business and industry is waking up to the fact that there isn't that hand in glove relationship now, and they're spending a lot more time talking to the colleges and universities saying, this is what we need from you. And frankly, if the colleges and universities don't respond, I think business and industry is going to do more and more of the education programs themselves. And frankly, if they do that, I think the education business, and it is a business, is going to find that they have competition out there.
Yeah. Why is it important? Let's talk a little bit about the workers' rights side of all of this, too. Why is it important to you to protect independent contracting, especially when it comes to workers' rights?
Well, this country was built by independent contractors, contrary to what Joe Biden said. Joe Biden says all the time that the unions built this country. That is just simply not true. We didn't have major unions in this country until the 1930s, when the union movement really moved. But we had independent contractors up until that time in many, many cases. And right now, 80% of the independent contractors in our country love what they do. They love their operations. They don't want to work for somebody else. So it's very, very important that we protect that. Freedom is what this country was based on. Being forced to join a union is not what this country is about. We're about independent contractors. My father was an independent contractor most of his life. He was forced a lot of times to join a union when he worked up north. He would work away from home, even though we were living in North Carolina, because there were so few jobs, and he just hated it. He much preferred to be an independent contractor. So I learned about this early on in my life. My daughter runs our nursery and landscaping business now. She's an independent contractor. But we all know how independent contractors have the capability of becoming great entrepreneurs and building big businesses. That's just the freedom of this country, is to be that way.
Well, and yeah, it is freedom. There's lots of folks who choose to be independent contractors and some who choose not to be. And that's really what makes America great, is that choice. What would you say to conservatives? A lot of conservatives don't really pay a lot of close attention to labor issues. What would you say to conservatives who might not pay that close of attention to labor issues that they really should?
I would say to them that an old saying, if you are not at the table participating in the discussion, then you might become a victim of what that discussion is all about. And so I think it's very important that people pay attention to the emphasis, particularly that the Biden administration is putting on destroying the ability to be an independent contractor and trying to force people into unions. Only a small percentage, about 6% of the people in our country who work in the private sector are a part of unions, but the Biden administration is pushing unions in colleges and universities, with graduate students, with sports teams, everywhere. They're pushing unions because they want everybody to be a part of a union and not be an independent contractor. And again, it takes away freedom from Americans. And anytime we see movements to take away our freedom, then we should pay attention.
All right. Well, you're finishing up your final term as the chairwoman of the Education and Workforce Committee. What can we expect next from the indomitable Dr. Foxx?
I like that term, indomitable. The Lord's given me lots of energy, and I tell everybody I'm going to keep using it as long as I have it. Well, I will be in Congress, I hope, another term at least, and I hope to be able to stay on the committee. That's always up to our steering committee, but I hope to be able to stay on the committee, and I hope to be able to use what I've learned over the years and my experiences to promote the same values that I've been promoting since I've been in Congress and since I was in the state Senate and as a college president, university administrator. I'll keep promoting those values. You know, the value of freedom, the value of good education, hard work, the rule of law, all of those things that conservatives believe in, that I want to continue to promote those. I like to continue to promote those till the day I die. That's what I think we have to do. And when citizens ask me, you know, they write to me and they say, oh, the country's in a terrible mess. What can I do to make a difference? And I'll say, well, you know it's in a mess. You see it going in the wrong direction. Go out there and educate your neighbor and tell your neighbor who feels the same way you do how you and he can do something. Write letters to the editor. But basically, we need to educate more people as to what are the true values in our country and help others adopt them, or at least act on the adoption of those values. Because I think the vast majority of the people in our country feel the way I do. They just don't know how to act upon their feelings.
Well, it really does come down to freedom and liberty and opportunity. And I think you embody that, just talking about your story a little bit, but, hard work. That's what America was built on. And it is the land of opportunity, and there is great potential in America. Dr. Foxx, Madam Chairwoman, thank you for all you do for our country. You bet.
Thank you. Could I make one more quick comment? One more quick comment. We are living in the greatest time in the history of human beings, and particularly as it relates to education and workforce. There have never been more opportunities for jobs and work, and there have never been more opportunities for education. So I would say to people, celebrate the time that we're living in and be happy that you're living now when you do have so many opportunities before you.
What a great point, and what a great optimistic point. And I mean, if we're going to win for the cause of liberty and freedom, we have to be optimistic. And so you bet. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thanks for joining us. Well, what a spark plug that the chairwoman is, Congresswoman Virginia Foxx. It's great to have someone like that in charge of the Education Committee in Congress, someone who is a champion on free market education reforms, but also someone who is going to hold folks accountable. I mean, you've got colleges and universities around the country that have been forcing people, selling these the idea of coming in and getting a degree, sometimes for something that's silly. And there's been no accountability to them. They haven't been held accountable for that. And who's on the hook? The taxpayer, especially when you've got the Biden administration just go ahead and wiping away the debt from many of these people that took out bad student loans. So somebody needs to hold these institutions accountable, and I'm glad Congresswoman Virginia Foxx is there to help us do that. Listen, thanks for joining us. Education, such an important issue. We talk so much about it here, and educational freedom even more important. So thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.